My dear students of first secondary grade, hello again in a new episode and new unit. We are going to complete the syllabus of this term, and we are going to study today the unit 4, chapter 1, speaking about the principles of classification in living organisms. Actually, my dear students, we have a huge number of living organisms live on this earth. And they differ in characteristics, and we cannot deal with each one of them individually, unless we find a way to group them or to put them into group, and this is called classification. Classification is a process that we all use in our daily life. For example, if we have our desk at home and this desk contains many things, books, mobile or electronic devices, or stationaries like pens or pencils, and copybooks or any other things, and we need to arrange them into place, and the electronic devices, we gather them at another side, and so on. So we use classification in our daily life quite often. So if we speak about the living organisms, we need to classify or to put them into groups. So what is the classification? And sometimes we call it taxonomy, which is the science to classify living organisms. Classification is of living organisms according to their similarities and differences. My dear students, great number of living organisms live on this earth, and when we classify them, we put living organisms into groups according to their similarities. Or, for example, if we speak about reptiles, all reptile organisms have common characteristics, and this group differs from another group, for example, birds. And the birds have similar or common characteristics, differ than the reptiles or the mammals. So when we put them into groups, so the individuals on the same group have common characteristics which differ from the individuals in other groups. So similarities means the common characteristics. So the arrangement of living organisms according to similarities and differences is called classification. Why do we classify living organisms? What's the importance of this process? Actually, scientists try to put them into groups to facilitate their study. If we need to study certain organism, so we need to know to which group this organism is related. So to facilitate their study, and if we have a new organism that was not classified before, we study the characteristics of this new individual and put it into the similar groups, or the group of a similar characteristics. So again, what's the importance of classification? Classification helps the scientists to facilitate the studying of these organisms and to identify new organisms many times to find a way to classify organisms. And we have an example here, the scientist or the philosopher called Aristotle. Aristotle tried to put the living organisms into groups, and his trial was 2,300 years ago, and he put the organisms into main groups: animals and plants. The animals were classified into red-blooded animals or bloodless animals. So this is the classification of Aristotle, or the trial of Aristotle to classify organisms. The animals could be red-blooded or bloodless. And as you see, this is not a scientific principle to classify all animals into two groups. Also, he classified the plants into three groups according to the height of the plant: trees, shrubs, and weeds. And also, this is not scientific principle. Many scientists tried later on to classify the organisms into other groups after the modern system of classification depended on the definition of what is called species. What is meant by species, or sometimes we is meant by species, or sometimes we pronounce it species. The species is a group of individuals having similar morphological characteristics. Similar morphological characteristics. What's morphological characteristics? The morphological characteristics mean the external features of the living organism. As we said, the reptiles have common features externally, and they didn't examine the internal structures. But and also the birds. The birds are covered with feathers, and they have beak, they have two legs, two wings, they lay eggs. So these are the external characteristics or morphological characteristics. And these individuals in the same group could or can mate together and produce fertile offspring similar to them. So the pigeons reproduce and give the new individuals having the same characteristics, sometimes the same color of feathers, and so on. So the same group, or the individuals of the same group should mate together and reproduce or produce new fertile organisms. We have here some examples of species. Giraffe, all of them have common characteristics: the long neck, the shape of patterns on the skin or on the outer shape of the skin of them, and the structure of the head, and so on. All of them are mammals, of course. And the other example is the ants. All of them are similar in their morphological characteristics, as you see, and reproduce to give new ones. Sunflower is one of the plants. They can cross together to produce new plants of the same color of the flowers and the same behavior, and so on. So the individuals within one species can reproduce to produce fertile organisms. But sometimes it occurs that one organism from one species reproduce or mate with another organism in another species. And we have two examples here. The tigon, as you see in this picture, is a result of mating a lion female and a tiger male. the lion and tiger are different species, but they could reproduce to bring one type called tigon. And this tigon is not a species because it cannot reproduce. It is sterile organism, unable to mate and reproduce or to give new individuals. So it is not a species. And this is also, we have in this part a give reason question. Why the tigon is not considered as a species? This is because it is a sterile organism and cannot reproduce. We have another example. Mule. Mule is also a sterile organism produced from mating a male donkey with a female horse. And as you see, it gathers the characteristics of both the horse and the donkey. It cannot be considered one of the donkeys or one of the horses, so it is a new type of organisms called mule, and this mule is sterile, that is unable to mate and reproduce, and it is also not considered as a species. We move to another title, which is naming the living organisms. How can we give them names? Carlos Linnaeus, the scientist who first started to put or give names to the living organisms, and he proposed a system for nomenclature. The word nomenclature means giving names to living organisms, called the binomial system of nomenclature. And this binomial system written by Latin language. Why he used Latin language? Because the Latin language is the language which is not spoken by people nowadays, and because it is not spoken, it is not used, it is protected from any modification or change. For example, if we speak about the English language is modified along years, American English. So by using the language, it could be changed. But Carlos Linnaeus used the Latin language to be protected from any change or any modification. And this Latin language is known all over the world. So the people who live in Japan or in Africa or in America or Europe, anywhere all over the world, know the name of this organism. All of them use the same name for the same organism. So the binomial name, for example, we have Homo sapiens, and Homo sapiens means the human being, al-insan al-aqil. Homo refers to a level of classification called genus, and sapiens refers to the species. And as you see here, we write the scientific name in two words. This is binomial name, and we put capital letter for the genus and small letter in the species, and both of them are underlined. Another example, Canis familiaris. Canis familiaris is the name of the dog. Canis refers to the genus, and familiaris refers to the species. What are the genus and what are the species? Actually, we have levels of classification, and we call it a series of classification. The taxonomy hierarchy. We put the living organisms into big groups, and each group is called kingdom. And this kingdom includes huge number of the organisms, for example, like the animals. The animal kingdom includes many types or many kinds of mammals and birds and reptiles, fish, insects, everywhere, everything. So the animal kingdom includes a very huge variety of animals, but this is not nice to study them. So we need to put this huge kingdom into smaller groups, and the smaller groups are called phyla. Each phylum of them includes a group of the animals that have similar characteristics and differ from the other phylum. And we have an example here. The animal kingdom includes many phyla. One of them is phylum Chordata. All of these animals in phylum Chordata have spinal cord. And of course, this chordata differs from the invertebrates like insects or worms or any other animals. And this phylum Chordata includes also huge number of animals and can be classified into smaller groups, and each group is called class. And the classes are many in one phylum. One class can be classified into orders, and each order can be divided into families, and each family can be divided into genera, and each genus can be divided into the species. So we reach to the smallest unit or the smallest group of organisms in the classification hierarchy, which is called the species. So what is the species? The species is a group of individuals, as we said. Group of individuals have similar characteristics and can reproduce together to produce fertile organisms. Now we have an example of the classification, which is called dichotomous key. The dichotomous key depends on classifying the group into two groups. In each time we divide them into two groups according to certain principle or according to certain characteristic. For example, the insects here, the insects can be classified into two groups, wingless or winged. The wingless insects have no wings, like the ant. But the winged insects also include a great number of insects and can be classified again into two groups. And these groups are one pair of wings or two pairs of wings. So we classify them again according to the number of wings. One pair of wings, we can find some of them have legs which are shorter than the body, like the fly, the house fly. But other group have legs which are longer than the body, like the mosquito. So even one pair of wings, one pair of winged insects can be classified according to the length of the leg. The other group, which is two pair of wings or containing two pairs of wings, like the moth, which have wings covered by bright scales, like this moth. Or another group having the wings which are not covered with bright scales, or the wings are transparent, like the dragon. So again, this system or this way of classification, in each time we find a principle or a characteristic that on which we can classify the groups of organisms. We have another group here, plant tissues. In the plant tissues, we can find meristematic tissue or permanent tissue, and these tissues can be classified into simple or complex, and so on. So my dear students, classification is very important for studying the living organisms, and today we have just an introduction for the classification and diversity of living organisms and how we classify them. And next time, inshallah, we are going to study the modern system of classification, which depends on classifying all living organisms into 5 kingdoms. And these kingdoms are Monera, Protista, fungi, plants, and animals. Speaking about Monera group or kingdom, the Moneran group includes all of them are types of bacteria. And we are going to classify the bacteria into groups according to the way of nutrition, for example, or the shape of bacteria. Speaking about the way of nutrition, we can find the bacteria can be classified into autotrophic and heterotrophic. And according to the shape, we classify bacteria into long shape or bacillus, and can be classified also according to the shape, the outer shape of bacteria, like spherical shape or spiral shape or rod shape. So there are three types of bacteria can be distinguished from each other. Next time, inshallah, we are going to speak about Kingdom Monera in details, and until we meet again, goodbye.